Hi, and welcome everybody. This is Ursula with the Ascension Playground, and I'm joined by Anne-Marie with Starseeds Rising and our wonderful guest, Nancy Jean with Nancy Jean's Garden. Hello, hello.
Yay.
Hello, everybody.
Well, it's the weekend, and what do we like to do? We like to talk about all things galactic or energetic to really understand where we've come from and who we are now and where we're going. So this is the first time Anne-Marie and I are going to serve as two little whispering angels on Nancy Jean's shoulders to walk her through her galactic soul history, but just where you're from, your origin, and then your most recent lifetime. So we're just gonna might explain some things, but we don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, well, any explanations are welcome.
Okay. Well, I was sharing earlier that I have Nancy Jean's throat chakra and heart chakra eggs to help me speak and open my heart. And Anne-Marie and I have said a heart prayer and lit candles. So we're all set. We've held sacred space for the sharing.
Totally toned into this.
Okay, well, I am going to start actually with what we call Julia Balaz's Starseeds report. This is a free online calculator where we've added Nancy's birth information, and now we're looking at her basic star report. And Nancy, if you can see, these are the names of constellations that are basically your soul family.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you know, on a greater perspective, we're all part of the all that is, but when we want to find out where you're from, look, we've got Andromeda, Orion, Virgo, Boots, Ursa Minor. So you're probably seeing some constellations that you may recognize. And the beautiful thing about this calculator is you can learn about constellations you never heard of. Yeah, and look, by the way, there's something called galactic. You've got access to the galactic center. Did you know?
Yeah, I heard rumors about that once.
Well, this is how we roll it out. We first look at, you know, where you're from. And so we work with Pluto, but since there's nothing in Pluto, we move to Neptune. So we'll be talking to you about Andromeda. And then we find out your most recent lifetime. And what do we see again? Andromeda. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. So when someone asks, you know, are you Andromedan? You've got a double scoop here, my friend. Double scoop.
Well, I tell you, it's better than living in the state I live in now.
Me too. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, you both are in the middle of the country, and I'm out in California.
Yeah.
Okay, well, with just that information about Andromeda, Anne-Marie's got a PowerPoint presentation that she's going to share. We're just going to walk you through 6 slides and tell you a little story. And then you can see if this feels right or not for you. So we're going to go to the first slide. Here we go. So what we're showing you, Nancy, is in the stars above Earth or within our solar system, there are 88 named constellations. I mean, it's so huge. But when we want to find Andromeda, we put in the picture of Andromeda. There she is. She's upside down. She's the chained princess. So that's who's helping inform. Her story might inform your current story as Nancy Jean. So we're looking at the big picture of here's all the constellations, 88 named. Here's Andromeda. And then we're going to go to the next slide, which will show us within the Andromeda constellation, Nancy, there's these very key fixed stars. And see that word Alpherots at the very bottom? Alpherots.
Yes.
We're going to have a little story about Alpherots. And then at the very other end is Almach. So those are the 2 stars I wanted to show you. But when you talk about the constellation Andromeda, it's like, okay, then there's stars in the constellation.
Yeah.
Just like, okay. So then we're getting to the next. Here we go. Now we're going to enter into a little story time. And so we're going to have Anne-Marie share us the myth of Andromeda. And we're showing you a picture of she's in the sky and she's got someone nearby. Okay.
And you're probably very familiar with the story of Andromeda. She's a princess in Ethiopia, and her mother and father are the king and queen.
Mhm.
And the queen was looking out at the Aegean Sea and noticing the Nereids or the mermaids swimming about, and thought that her daughter Andromeda was even more beautiful than they were. And they took offense to that and went to Poseidon and complained. And so he sent judgment by the form of a sea monster to harass the village. And so the king and queen called upon the politicians of the day to find out what to do about this terror attack. And they determined that they should sacrifice Andromeda to the sea monster. And so they chained her to the rocks. When Perseus, you see there, the prince, came about and saw her and decided that he wanted to marry her. So he asked her father for that if he could rescue her and have her hand in marriage. And so he rescued her and they were married. The problem with that is we never even hear what Andromeda thought about any of that. And her whole life was constantly changed by the moment, out of her control, and her freedoms were curtailed by the consequences of others' actions.
Mhm.
And so as far as we know, she just held on to a higher perspective of and hoped that the fates would remember her and keep her safe. So I think that little story, then we know where the characteristics of a starseed from Andromeda come from.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, we're getting close to the end of our slideshow, but
Okay.
but oh yeah, I'm just going to call out. Thank you, Anne-Marie, for that little story about the myth, because people who say I'm from Andromeda or I'm Andromedan, well, yeah. Did you have mother issues? Did father issues? Did you feel like persecuted and victimized without any control over your upbringing? So
Constant change. And
what's the deal with Perseus? He says, oh, before I save you from this monster who's coming, the sea monster, let me first ask your dad for your hand in marriage. So it's like
he never asked her, as far as we know.
I tell you what, if I was chained to the rock, I'd say, okay, fine, he looks good.
Yeah, he'll do. He'll do.
So, many people know about Pleiadians and say, oh, I'm from Pleiades, but a more highly advanced society is from the constellation Andromeda. So if you Google Andromedan starseeds, you can find a lot of interesting characters and traits. So here's just a few general ones.
Okay.
First of all, I read that, there aren't too many true Andromedan starseeds on the planet Earth right now, only 1%. When Anne-Marie and I first started doing this, let's share the calculator story on YouTube. We did Maya Angelou's chart. She had 13 soul connections to Andromeda. Yours are up there. You have not just 2, you have many. So, but you're like part of the very small percentage where freedom is your number 1 value. And isn't it interesting? I read The Flow of Change. This is the Andromedan consciousness. Here on Earth, we know we're working with the consciousness of duality and polarity, good and bad. I'm not going to get political, but it's that whole drama of good and bad. Well, in Andromeda, it's about always changing, the flow. And I think I've heard you say on your channel, I'm just going with the flow. I'm going with the flow. And so, but it's very Andromedan to say something like that. But guess what? Because you're so few on the planet, you do have a powerful message to broadcast to everybody. And look at these words: freedom beyond politics, Nancy Jean.
Yeah, well, that's my freedom is, let me tell you.
Beyond politics. Like
beyond.
Wow. Well, there's more, right? So look at the next one: higher dimensional beings, 5th dimension and above.
Bingo.
Right. And you're like, this is why she likes purple hair. Danny Shea said, don't talk about the hair. I go, I love the purple hair.
Absolutely.
So that spectrum of the violet, it's one of the, again, high
Mhm.
frequency. And these people from Andromedan are very beautiful, and people who can see clear, what is that? Clear audio, no, clear vision. If you have clear sight, you can actually see an
Mhm.
iridescent glow. And typically there's a healing energy by just you being you. So you don't have
Mhm.
to really do anything, though many Andromedans do get into Reiki or energy healing. I even read sacred geometry was part of the Andromedan characteristics and traits.
Mhm.
And then lastly, on this little slide, because you're so highly advanced as far as an Andromedan starseed, working with technology, understanding things on a higher level spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. But here's the thing that comes out: unconventional revolutionaries. In fact, I was listening to Alyssa Royal Holt today, and she said about Andromedans, they are the
Mhm.
new thought pioneers. New thought pioneers, Nancy Jean,
That's
sharing the new paradigm.
mhm. That's my job.
Oh my God, you're a
I'm
new thought.
supposed to bring things. I saw a new thought today. I saw I saw a show on a young woman does physics. And I know people like physics, but she was talking about how they've used the Google quantum computer to build a fourth dimension crystal.
Wow.
It contains time.
What?
Oh my goodness.
Oh my
And
God.
you remember that, like the time, it's like the thing that used to be in Doctor Who's spaceship. And physics used to say that can't happen because time wasn't a dimension that we could control. Okay. Well, then in 2012, this one physicist at MIT came up with an idea of, well, maybe we could do it this way. In 2021, they used the Google's quantum, the big giant computer, the really fast one, and it actually created crystals that have, it was something that has all the characteristics of a crystal, which means the uniform spacing of the molecular structure. That's what makes a crystal a crystal. Things that don't have that are stones, okay? So crystals like that, but they were able to put in the fourth dimension of time.
Anne-Marie, can we go to gallery view real quick? Because my jaw, you're not seeing my jaw drop. It's like, whoa, this is huge.
I already did that.
New thought pioneer.
And when I'm watching it, I'm like, yeah, my crystals do that now. You know, I actually wrote the woman a letter and I'm going to mail it tomorrow. She has only she doesn't have an email for her to contact her because she's got 2 million followers. So I can understand why. But I'm going to send her a letter and say, I work with crystals, and my crystals, I think, do reach across time now, even though they're earthbound. You just haven't figured out how to measure it.
That's awesome.
It's no accident then that you're tracking the ley lines. You're
No.
working with dragon energy. You've got the purple hair. You've got the crystals. You've got the grids. You know, so it's not your everyday typical human, right? So this narrative around the Andromedan starseed, it's really you allowing yourself to consider, test it for accuracy. Does it feel right or not? But
Yeah.
how many people really have an iridescent glow and are tracking things at high level like you are?
Well, you know, it's like Danny says, I can find more rabbit holes than any humans he's ever met. And I do remember when I was little, my mother used to turn around and look at me and said, where did you come from? Well, now we know.
Oh, that's a really good question. I'm going to share my screen real quick then. Let me show you. Now, your friend Dorothy Morgan is way advanced with the astrology, and it's so fun to meet her and your friends. Let me go down here. So here's what Dorothy would look at typically: planets and the signs,
Right.
etc.
In the houses.
What we've done with Julia Balaz is adding the stars, the fixed stars, to add more cosmic wardrobe to your soul's agreement. So when we look at, as you said, where are you from? And we're gonna turn to 2 slides that are left, but we're gonna talk about this little guy down here, Alphareps. So Alphareps, ALPH, I just want you to see how that's connected right down here to this bottom of your chart. That's called the Imam Coeli. And then I want to also show you, see this word Alma?
Yeah.
Isn't that an interesting word to show up, right? For you.
Right.
We're going to talk about Alma, and but first we're going to let Anne Marie go to her slide where she's going to tell you a story about maybe where you're from for your origin.
Okay.
Okay.
Are our faces filling up the screen too much, or has that changed? Is it still the same?
I think it's only recording the slide.
Okay.
No, it's not. It's recording whatever you see.
Okay. Because it's pretty big there. I'm not sure. So you see Alpharots there with the red arrow down here at her head. And so we can recognize then that with the hair and everything you've got going, you've got your Andromeda with your purple hair. The energy from Alpharots, this is a lucky star. This is wisdom and intelligence, emotional maturity, and you being called upon to give advice. That sounds like Nancy Jean to me. Now this is, as we saw, that it's conjunct the bottom of your chart, your foundation. And so this energy, this was abundant in your home life, in your foundational energies. As you were growing up, you had access to this energy from your foundations in your family. But it's also opposing Neptune. So then as you grow up, and Neptune is in your 10th house of your career and your public life, these energies would then come in abundance in your career later in life, as like your late 30s. And so, you know, initially it could be that your career might have been a little frustrating to get off the ground, but then once it got going, you just had access to all of this wisdom and intelligence and the lucky star energies of Alpharots. Does that sound
my career didn't. I started one way, then went and got a master's degree, was going to go back into broadcasting, and then instead went to the worst job of my life, working for a corporate entity, and I got out of it in my late 30s. So
there you go. Yeah.
And I started running my own thing because I figured out I'm the only person I can work for.
Well, that's
part of the Andromedan thing too, because it's freedom.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, a free agent. Oh my gosh. Well, now we see, you know, the hair, you know, the purple hair. So we went from the head, your beautiful hair. Now we're going to go to your foot.
Okay.
Head to toe Andromeda.
Yeah, you're the chained princess, right? But that was the narrative or the myth you kind of landed here. So your most recent lifetime. Now, some people, when they think they're like Pleiadian, well, you could maybe find a recent lifetime in Pleiades, but the start of your origin that Anne Marie just said is sometimes different. Yours happens to be the same. So we're looking at, again, the fixed star called Almach. But did you see how when I showed you the wheel?
Yeah, it turned into Alma. Yes.
Alma. Now, who's Alma?
Alma's my creative person that helps me design my gardens and my grids, and not the grids, my gardens and my eggs.
So, see, that's the thing. You've got a guide. When people show up with that name or this fixed star, this is what I learned. Okay, it's sitting at 13 degrees of Taurus.
That's a degree off from my natal sun.
Exactly. So that energy, the fixed star is so close to your sun. It's basically merging. And you probably know your sun, wherever that lands in your chart, is your strongest and greatest light in this lifetime. So your greatest light is merged with this beautiful star Almach. Now, it's also, you've got your Venus nearby. So imagine your sun, this story of Almach and Venus, but it's in the 5th house of creativity. It's joy, it's children. Now, I'm not saying children always equal joy, but it's your creative expression in Taurus where Venus is at home. So you got an extra scoop of the love and family and nurturance. So the foot of the princess. I'm going to go back to this idea of the princess chained. And you get, as Anne Marie said, maybe that was the way in the first part of your life and maybe even the second. But by the time you hit this 3rd part of your life, that call for freedom and for new thought pioneering, this is your time of liberation if you choose it.
Good.
Yeah.
You know the story about Alma, don't you? She called me, she contacted me and she said, I want to mentor with you. And I didn't know she was an artist. She said, I have a degree in geology and I want to learn about spirit and maybe I can help you with the stones and you can help me. And I looked at her request and she seemed like a perfectly solid person and everything, but I was just like, I'm like the world's worst mentor person. I'm like, I never keep, I ran in 2 minutes before we started the show, right? I lose track of time. I'm not really here most of the time. So I wrote her back and I said, I met her on a Zoom call and said, oh, you're charming and lovely. And then I wrote her a note and I said, I've thought about it and I'm just not sure I can commit the time you need. And that was really my concern, is that I'm such a flake. Anyway, so that night I went to bed thinking, oh, well, I'm not going to mentor anybody. And I rolled over in bed. And I swear to you, my angels kicked my head around the bedroom like a soccer ball. How dare you turn your back on that young woman? Whenever you needed help with some subject, someone was there to help you. What's your deal? And so the next morning I had to wake up and write her a big mea culpa and say, I'm so sorry. I've rethought this. If you're willing to trust someone who's flaky enough to say no and then yes and then and that was before we designed anything. I mean, that was the beginning of our friendship. So she called me that day. She was so excited. And then months later, she told me that the night I told her that she got the email that I wasn't going to mentor her, she went screaming around her bedroom, throwing things, saying, I want a mentor. I want a mentor. I need to work with this woman. What the hell's going on? That's the woman I'm supposed to be working with.
Oh my goodness.
So she's now one of my very good friends.
That's awesome.
Well,
And there's that connection in your 5th house of creativity.
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful.
And at the foot, so the unchained foot gets to run around,
That's right.
Moving and shaking and doing your special dance together. Wow, you can't make this stuff up. Now, there was something on the Andromeda charts that said, it did say the word flaky, only because with the flow of change, Andromeda is always like, okay, I'm walking by every day. Here's the bakery and here's the tobacco store. But in Andromeda, it's like, okay, the next day I come out and no, it's a donut shop and it's Safeway. It's that kind of constancy of change. And so that may show up for you, being your point of origin plus your most recent lifetime, this idea of constancy of change, like not even a little, it's like always flowing. So it's learning how to be in the river and accepting it. It's like, okay, you showed up very, very differently, but you got bookended with Andromeda, top to tail.
You also, people come to me, I always say all my best readings are when people are in a period of flux, because I've had to learn how to live with so much change and how to define it and how to control, not control it, but how to go with it and to not freak out about it. That's when I'm at my best with people. And that's when I meet most of the other readers. They'll call me and they'll say, I wanted to talk to you about something, and sometimes it's the stones, but most often it's just everybody's career is shifting right now. And I'm getting a whole lot of, I just spent a week with Sheila. We got to
in the heat. You had so
oh
much
no,
going on.
I tell you, it became a problem because she was not used to it, and she could go out and be out in it for a few hours and then she'd have to go home. Plus my car's AC broke. So, but we did have ways to get AC cars, but just getting in and out of the heat, if you're not used to it, it's unbelievable. And she got home to Colorado last night and it was snowing on the top of Pikes Peak, 69 degrees where she was. But yeah, she got to see, but she enjoyed it. We had a meetup with a bunch of our subbies that are in the area. It was just if you can make it, here's where we're going to be from this time. Met 26 of our subscribers. It was absolutely fascinating.
Wow.
Because I used to read people live. That's what I did. But, for the last, since February of 2020, I haven't read anyone live except for the one ill-fated Christmas party where I got COVID. So we don't count that one. But it was really interesting. It was really, really fascinating. And to meet them and get a chance to talk to them. And Aiden came, the young reader I didn't know he lived in this area. And he said, I live near there. Can I come too? And of course, he's a minor. So he pointed out, do not give the redheaded kid at the end of the bar anything.
No beer. Wow. Well, what a journey. I have to tell you, the last thing that they said about Andromedan starseeds is because you're so rare, because you're so different and you're wired
Mhm.
at such a high level that you can feel a little isolated at times because you wonder, hey, isn't there anyone else out there like me? And the answer is not really, not really, not really.
Yes.
So I'll just wrap by saying, one, thank you for letting Anne-Marie and I be like two little angels on your shoulder.
Sure.
I've
Thank
never
you.
done this before, but maybe we'll go hop over to someone else and just do these live minis, because if it helps someone understand where they've come from and where their most recent lifetime was. So for you, encapsulated form, it's, we know where the purple hair came from. We know the changed princess mythology can be like freedom and liberation is super strong. And lastly, that this idea of new thought paradigm, you're holding this, and it's not one thought, it's like all of this new thought for you. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. Because, you know, I mean, obviously I talk to Dr. Gail all the time, but she's like, she fixes them when they're broken. And I keep saying, do you need to work on me? No, you're fine.
You are fine. You are fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we might be going to chat with Dr. Gail next, so we can try and work little angel wings on her shoulders next.
Yes, that would be cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for inviting me to your show, and invite people to come over if you want to see more about the person that's 1% of the planet. Come over to Nancy Jean's garden.
Absolutely. Wonderful.
And Starseeds Rising with Anne-Marie and the Ascension Playground. So, well, thank you, everybody.
Okay.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.